Hi.
What's up, Joey here at School of Motion, and welcome to day 27 of 30 days of After Effects. I wanna give a huge shout out to a motion graphics artist that I love and respect, and that is Cyriak. Now, if you're unfamiliar with his work, please go to his YouTube channel right now and just watch at least a dozen of his videos. Don't do it right before you go to sleep though, that's a bad idea. Cyriak has this amazing brain that comes up with this really weird stuff, and what I love about it is that he does it all in After Effects just using brute force for the most part. There's not like a trick to what he does. He's just very precise and very patient, and he does a ton of roto and tracking and hand animation, and it's very, very hard and very, very time consuming. That's why most people don't do it, it's just too hard. So I wanna show you how I made this crazy thing behind me, which was inspired by one of his videos. You're gonna see how much work it takes, but hopefully you're gonna learn some cool tricks and maybe get a new appreciation for Cyriak's work. Don't forget to sign up for a free student account so you can grab the project files from this lesson, as well as assets from any other lesson on School of Motion. Now let's hop into After Effects and get started.
So this is the masterpiece that we're going to be creating here, and I don't know, this fits my sense of humor, which I think is why I love Cyriak's work so much. I want to show you the piece of his that I was sort of inspired by, and I wanted to recreate for this video. So it starts with him, staring at you for an awkwardly long period of time before his head turns into this weird crab monster. And there's a lot of things Cyriak kind of does in his work. He's kind of has a lot of these mouths and tongues and weird eyes and weird spots, and he seems to be obsessed with body parts being used in ways they weren't meant to be used. I want to point out one thing, which is at the very beginning of this animation here, where the head turns into the hand. It's done in a very slick way, and to me what this looks like is a plugin called RE-Flex, it sort of lets you do really, really high-end morphing in After Effects. And I don't have that plugin, and it costs $600. So I did this a different way, but I wanted to point that out. That's and I could be wrong. Cyriak is known for doing things that just take a really long time and doing a lot of hand rotoscoping and moving. So maybe he built this effect by hand, but it looks like RE-Flex. And I just wanted to point that out because I do my effect a little differently. I have the monster come out of my mouth so that I could avoid having to use the morphing plugin. So just so you guys know. So let's start just by looking at the footage I shot. So here's the main piece of footage, just me sitting against the wall. And I did this, 10 times before I settled on a take that I liked. So step one is, maybe you need to drink a little bit, or if you're like me, you have no shame, and so you're happy to get in front of a camera and do this. And I didn't do anything to this footage yet. This is just straight footage. Then I started shooting all the parts of the monster I was going to need. So here's the shot of the hand. Now this chair here, this is actually like a camping chair that I had kicking around, and it just happened to be like the perfect chroma green color. I'm shooting these videos in my spare bedroom at this point, so I don't have a studio. I could have gone over to Ringling and used their green screen studio, but it was kind of late when I was doing this, so use whatever you got. One of the things about Cyriak's videos, a lot of them, is they don't look super polished and super slick. They look sort of hand done, and that's one of the things that makes them so cool and gives them a neat quality. So all I did was, open my hand, wiggle my fingers around, and then close my hand. Now you'll notice I drew a little X on my wrist. I don't normally have an X on my wrist, and I did that because I knew that, when I shot this, my hand was gonna move around a little bit. I tried to hold it very, very still, and I did an okay job, but it does move a little bit. And I knew that in the final video, I didn't want the motion of the hand to come from my wrist wiggling around. I wanted it to look like those hands were stuck to the face. So I needed to remove all of the motion the sort of just the natural wiggling motion of my hand. And so the way you do that is you stabilize the footage. And that's why I put an X there, thinking, hey, if I need to stabilize the footage, I'll have a nice little tracking marker. So let me show you how you do that. What you do is you first trim your footage. So you're only going to stabilize the piece you need. So I've already trimmed my comp, and this is all the footage I need to stabilize. Double click your layer, and it opens up a layer viewer. And I've talked about this before, the difference between a composition viewer, which is what you normally look at, and a layer viewer, which just lets you look at your footage, but it also allows you to paint and do tracking. So here's my tracking controls. And if you don't see them, go up to Window and hit this tracker button. And I'm just going to say Stabilize Motion. Now, if you're not familiar with tracking and stabilizing, in general, you can track or stabilize three things: position, rotation, and scale. And you can stabilize all three, two of the three, or one of the three. In this case, I only need to stabilize position because my hand isn't getting closer and further away from the camera. It's not rotating too badly. I just want to take out the motion of the position, okay? So that's why there's only one checkbox. And if you're only stabilizing one of these features, you only need one tracker. So here's my track point. Now you see the first thing I did was I expanded it. And really quickly, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but this inner box, this is the feature that is going to be tracked, okay? So I need to line that up with the X. And you can give it a little bit of extra room like this, and it will sort of have more information to track. The bigger this box, the more pixels will be tracked. This outer box is how far away from this box should I look on each subsequent frame. So if there's a ton of motion, I may need a big box, but there's not a lot of motion, so I'm gonna leave this kind of small. And the bigger this box, the longer it takes to track. It'll just take more processing. So now I've got this set up. We'll hit this little play button. It's going to track forward, and I will pause the video so you guys don't have to watch this whole thing. All right, so tracking's done, and we now have a good tracking point on this. You can see it track that X perfectly, and you can see the motion as it moves up and down. So once you've done that, you hit apply. Okay, and now it's going to bring back up your composition viewer, and if you look on the layer and you hit U, you're going to see there's a keyframe on every single frame. And if I hit spacebar and just sort of let this play through, you'll see that now my footage actually moves around. You can see that After Effects is literally moving the footage so that this point never moves on screen. All right, and so the net effect is it's creating this awesome, perfectly still looking footage of my hand. Now that I've done that, I'm going to pre-comp this, and I'll just call this hand pre-comp. Okay. And before I do that, I just want to make sure that I'm actually working on a copy of my hand and not on the actual hand. So I'm just gonna dive into this really quickly. You'll get a little sneak preview of what's about to happen, and this should all look pretty familiar to you. Okay, cool. So now that I have pre-comped the stabilized footage, all right, I'm going to do the same keying procedure that I did in the tracking and keying series with the Baltimore Orioles that was part of 30 Days of After Effects. So first, I just do, a big kind of rough garbage mat and try to get rid of, what I can. There we go. All right, and I don't want to keep any of this black part of the chair, just the green part of the chair. And I knew I wasn't going to keep my wrist. I was only going to keep the hand. All right. And now with that step done, you can really see how well that's stabilized. The hand looks like it's just totally locked into place. So stabilizing, I'm pretty sure stabilizing is a very common tool that Cyriak uses when he does his work. And you need to kind of scrub through the footage because you'll see the black parts of that chair can kind of sneak back into the frame every once in a while. Okay, so that's good. All right, so now that I've got that garbage mask, now I'm going to go back into my obsolete effect group here, and I'm going to use the color key. If you haven't watched the keying and tracking tutorials in the Baltimore Orioles series, you may want to watch that first because this keying technique that I'm using, it's the exact same one that I go into detail in that video. So you may want to watch that because I'm going to kind of fly through it here. So I'm just doing a quick color key. And I'm going to make sure I pick a green color that's close to the hand because that's really what I want to get rid of. There we go. Just get rid of as much as we can there. Okay. And then I'm going to use my edge thin and pull those edges back out. And I want to make sure that I'm just getting rid of as much green as possible. Another thing you can do, because you got these little guys out here, you know, that I couldn't really get rid of without eating away too much of the hand. What you can do is you can duplicate this color key and reset it, and on the copy of the color key, you can just pick the other color and then up the color tolerance. There we go, until it goes away. So you can double up that color key to help get rid of more stuff. And then use that edge thin again. Let's see here. All right, now I've eaten away a bunch of the hand and the finger here. So what I'm also going to do is I'm going to add a matte simple choker and just expand that mat out a little bit. Cool. So now we've got the world's tightest garbage mat around the hand. And you saw that didn't take very long, you know? That's like a really tight roto. So now I'm going to pre-comp this, and I'm going to make this a guide layer, this magenta solid here, because it makes it really easy to see if my key is working, but I don't want to forget about it and have it show up in my final comp. So there you go. So let's pre-comp this now, and we'll call this garbage matted. And now we can use key light. So we'll go to key light, and let's go to a frame like this. And I'm going to pick that green screen color. I'm going to go into screen matte, and let's take a look here. All right, and you know, this is not going to be a perfect key because I shot it against a camping chair. But you know, I'm going to use some of these settings here, and I'm probably going to have to crank them quite a bit. So first, I'm going to do what I did in the last video, where I turn this exposure way up so I can actually see better how much you know, garbage is in the back there I need to get rid of. Then I use the clip black to get rid of a bunch of that. Then I'll go back to my normal exposure. And there's no holes in the mat here that I'm seeing. Really, the problem is this kind of junk in there, right? And that's happening because of the shadow my hand was casting on the camping chair. So if we look at the final result, you can see that there's a bunch of garbage in there. So what I probably want to do is push that clip black even a little bit further and try and get rid of some of that. And it's going to make my edges a little bit crunchy, but that's okay. All right, so I'm really pushing that clip black. I don't need to touch the clip white. Now the edges still look kind of gross. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to shrink the mat a little bit. Okay, so I'm just using the shrink grow control here. And if you shrink the mat, see if I grow it and then I shrink it, you can see exactly what it does. And, you know, the fingers are going to be moving around pretty quickly. And, you know, I just needed to try and get as good a result as I can. Another thing you can use is this D-spot stuff, D-spot black and D-spot white. If I D-spot the black, you'll see that it sort of brings back some detail here. If I D-spot the whites, it gets rid of some of that. It kind of smooths that out a little bit. All right, and so now you can see that there's still kind of some schmutz in there, but our edges look a lot smoother. And it's actually not, you know, for our purposes, it's going to work just fine. This black stuff that's kind of, you know, that you're seeing in between the fingers, I can try to push the clip black a little bit more. Try to get rid of a little bit more of it. There we go. Now, I want to stress, this is not, you don't generally want to push the values this hard when you're keying. But in this case, because I didn't really shoot this on a green screen, this was against a camping chair, you know, I kind of had to do what I had to do. You can also see, if you look right here, like on the knuckles, there's kind of a greenish tint, which is the green spill, right? When you shoot something against a green background, a lot of times the color of that green background is going to spill onto your subject, and it's going to add a green color to it. And Keylight usually does a pretty good job of getting rid of it, but because this wasn't a real green screen and I've crushed these values so much, there's still a little bit in there. So one quick little trick you can do is you can add a hue and saturation effect and switch the channel controls from master to greens, and then just pull some saturation out of it. And let's see if the green's still there. I have a feeling when it's moving, you won't even be able to see it. But, you know, I'm holding my mouse over these pixels and I'm looking up here at the values. and those colors are pretty neutral now. So I think that helped. All right, so now we've got one hand. We've got a hand keyed out, and I'm just going to duplicate it to create our little hand monster. All right, now let's just remember what we did. We stabilized the hand, we did a garbage mat, and now we have used key light. All right, and we've gotten our hand nice and keyed, and it kind of looks like, someone remind me, what's the hand's name in the Addams Family, the little hand that walks around? Maybe that's how they did this. Okay, so now what I want to do is I'm going to make a new comp. And I'm going to start building out the monster. So let me make a 1920 by 1080 comp here. We'll call this monster. All right, and I'm going to drag my hand footage comp. Drag that into monster. All right, so here's our hand. And let's scoot it over like this. Now, what I want is I just want the hand. I don't really want the wrist. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw a mask around the wrist like this. And I'm going to set that mask to subtract. And I'm going to feather it a little bit. And I'm going to put a keyframe on it. So Option M. And I'm just going to kind of play through. And let me switch this to half res so it doesn't take a million years. All right. And what you want to do is just sort of, again, this is going to be moving really fast. And you're going to be able to get away with a lot, but you want to try and just get rid of the wrist so that when you duplicate this hand and you have two of them, it just looks like hands and it doesn't look like, two arms with hands on them. Because we're like making a weird sort of creature out of body parts. I think the more different the body parts look from the way they normally look in real life, I think the better off we're going to get our result to look. Okay, so I'm just doing this really fast, but you can see now we've got our hand kind of separated out. So let's scale this hand down a little bit, scoot this over. And now let's just duplicate this hand. And I'm going to scale the copy negative on the x-axis and scoot it over. Okay, so now I've got something like this. And let's name these. So this top hand is the right hand. So I'm going to say right dash hand. And then up here, you've got left dash hand. If I can type, here we go. Okay, and you can see that when they're sitting around wiggling like this, because we stabilized it, the hands are really still. And they kind of blend together, and it's really creepy. And I didn't get this when I did the demo that you guys saw at the beginning of the video, but that little notch in your hand is creating this really kind of creepy, disgusting little area there. All right, so at the beginning of the animation, you got to figure out where you want those hands to be. Okay, so I sort of had them like this. Okay, now, if you go like this and you kind of layer one hand over another, it starts to look like, a picture of a hand stuck on top of another picture of a hand. So another thing I did was, let me lock this mask here. And I'm actually going to go up to layer, mask, and say hide locked masks. This is a cool trick. If you're going to have multiple masks on a layer, you can go up to layer, mask, hide lock masks, and then whenever you lock a mask, it won't show up anymore. And that can just visually make it a lot easier to look at. And what I did was I masked out just sort of roughly around the fingers here and subtract that mask. Oh, I did it on the wrong hand. I need to do it on the right hand. And the reason I did this was because I wanted those two hands to really look more like what Cyriak had done, where it was sort of like interlocking fingers and something like this. And it looked a little bit more like there were actually two hands touching. So let me lock this mask. Let me feather this one a little bit. Right? I wanted something a little bit more like that at the beginning of this. And then once the hands separated, they can look, the way that they already look. All right, so I'm going to put a mask keyframe there. So just Option M. And then I'm going to move forward. and just sort of adjust this. And I'm doing this pretty rough for you guys because I don't want to spend a million years having you watch me roto. But just know that if you're going to try and do this, it just takes a long time. You really have to love what you're doing, and actually do the work of rotoscoping. All right, so I'm just going to kind of go through here as the hands separate, and I'm going to move the mask. There we go. Right, so that it just kind of cuts into this right hand and creates a nice little seam. And, like right here, like where sort of the meat of this hand is coming over this hand, I may want to come in and just adjust the mask to erase that part. And what you're going for is just, you want it to look really smooth and creepy, like the skin is just blending together like that. There we go. All right, and so now at the beginning, because we if I turn this mask off, you can see that by using that mask, and this happens so quick, but it just sort of makes it look a little bit more like two hands, that are kind of together, and then they open up and form this weird thing. Another thing you could try too is I could knock the right hands. I could knock this back like maybe 3 frames. So I'm gonna hold Option and hit Page Up 3 times. And now what you're going to get is a slightly offset timing on the hands too. You could offset them even more. Maybe not that much. You want them to open roughly at the same time, but you want them to just move a little bit differently. There we go. All right, so now you get a nice little bit of offset between them. And you can see this is already super creepy. All right, so now we've got our hands. And we would have to do the same thing at the end too, when the hands come back together like this, right? One of the things that I had to do was because I didn't actually animate, I didn't rotate my hands enough at the end. So at the end here, what I did was I just put position keyframes on these 2 layers and then went forward until the hands turned about as far as they're going to turn. And then I just scoot them closer together. Right, so that they're more in the arrangement they were at the beginning, and just put a little ease keyframe on there. And, I would need to go back in and create the mask and everything so that this kind of covers up the hand again. So there's a lot of just manual masking and tweaking that's involved. Okay, but now we've got the hand set up. So now let's move on to the mouth. So here's the mouth footage. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, you guys. Now, I've already stabilized this. You can see it's already stabilized, okay? And so once it's stabilized, you pre-comp it, and you can say mouth stable. And you should spell stable, right? You shouldn't do it like I just did it. So once you've done that, and by the way, to stabilize it, I think I used like a nostril or something. I just needed something that wasn't really moving. And so now, what you can do is let's go forward to a frame where the mouth is open, and let's just draw a mask around it. And you want to make sure that you give the mask enough room on the sides, because I'm sticking my tongue out and I don't want the tongue to get cut off. But I wanted it to be pretty tight on the lips, on the top and the bottom, so that those could just kind of blend into the hand. And also, I don't know, like I can grow a beard really fast, so there's some stubble on my face, and I knew that wouldn't really blend in with the hand very well. So I just made sure to do the top and the bottom of the lips kind of tight, and then leave a little room on the sides like this, so the tongue doesn't get clipped, okay? And then all you have to do is you do have to put some keyframes on the mask path so that when the mouth closes, right, we can close that up just like that. So again, a lot of, tedious roto. If you guys actually go through the process and recreate this, and then you go watch one of Cyriak's videos, you're going to have a huge appreciation for what he does, because the amount of work it takes is insane. Okay, so that's not bad. Okay, cool. And then we'll just do it on the beginning too. So there's the mouth. I'm going to add a I'm gonna add a keyframe there, go to the beginning, and then I'll just copy this keyframe since it should be fairly close. And we'll just kind of go forward. And we'll help this out a little bit on this frame. All right, and we're gonna feather the mask, of course, to help it blend in. Okay, there you go. And then we'll just feather this maybe like 30 pixels. And there's our mouth footage. It's really creepy when you just see the mouth. All right, so now let's go back to our monster pre-comp. And when these hands open, we're gonna want that mouth footage on the hand. All right, now you can see that when I shot this, I must have changed the focal length of the lens or something because the exposure changed. And so now this doesn't match at all. So what I first need to do is color correct it. And, luckily I shot this under the exact same lighting in the same room. So really it should just be a matter of adjusting the overall levels. I shouldn't have to do too much actual color correction. I shouldn't have to mess with like the blue and the red and the green channels. I should just be able to do an overall color correction. You can see now, just by brightening it overall, I've gotten it to match a lot better. And you can see here where the stubble is going into the hand. Oh, goodness. So I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees because I wanted it to look kind of like Cyriak's, where you kind of had this vertical mouth right in the middle. All right, there you go. It's fantastic. It's just so fantastic. Okay, and then here at the beginning, you can see I have so I want the mouth right in the middle, but it kind of opens off to one side, right? Because that's the way a jaw works. So I'm going to kind of split the difference. Let me just knock this over a little bit like that. All right, that works cool. All right, and I'll scale this up a little bit. There we go. All right, so we've got our mouth, and what I'm going to do just for now is I'm just going to go to the first frame where that mouth should appear, which is probably somewhere in here. And I'm going to hit Option left bracket to just trim that layer. Because on this frame, right, the fingers are covering it up, and then it should be revealed by the fingers. And I'm going to show you a cool trick to kind of make the roto for this a little bit easier. All right, because you are going to have to rotoscope the fingers back over the mouth and the eyes too. So here's our mouth. And I think I might just color correct this a little bit differently. You see how bright the skin is around the mouth compared to the hands. And so I may have gone a little heavy with this. And it does look like, like the skin of the hands is a little redder than this. So I may want to go into the red channel on my levels and just push a little more red in there by adjusting this gamma arrow, right? And you can see what that did. That did help kind of blend it in a little bit more. And then I'm just going to scale this down a little bit horizontally so that we don't have the mouth layer go outside the boundaries of the hands. And now it's better. Yeah, it matches a little bit better. All right, so now we've got the mouth in the middle. And now let's do the eyes. So the eyes, exact same deal, right? I've already stabilized this. I grabbed this little freckle right here and I stabilized my footage. And then pre-comp this and say eye stable. Gee whiz. Talk about bad spelling. All right, and then we just go like this. Just draw a mask around the eye, and the eye doesn't really move as much as the mouth. So you really only have to do that. Feather that maybe 30 pixels. And then we'll grab our eye footage and drop it in here. And scale that down. And we do want to color correct a little bit. It is looking a little bit dark. So let's zoom in and just try to match that. Color correct that to match the hands. There we go. All right, and then I'm just let me call this left eye and duplicate it. We have our right eye. We'll move this over here. And for the right eye layer, I'm just gonna slip this layer in time a little bit so that the eyes are not in sync to make it even creepier. And I need to do the same thing. I need to go forward. So this right eye, you're not gonna see it until this frame. So Option left bracket. And then on the left eye, you're not going to see it until probably this frame. So option left bracket. All right. And there you go. That's fantastic. Yeah. If any of you do this, try to do it with feet instead of hands. I think that would be even better. All right. So here's basically how I built the monster. Now I'm going to show you a trick I did to deal with the rotoscoping, because there was a few times where, like for example here, where these fingers come back over the eyes, and you need to cover the eye with the finger. And while I'm looking at this, I'm going to color correct that layer down a little bit so the skin matches. There we go. That's better. And then especially at the beginning, you want those fingers, to be on top of the layers and sort of reveal them. So here's what I did. You could use masks to do it, but I knew that would be a pain, because especially on frames, like this one, where all I need is three frames, right, of roto for that fingertip. And doing that type of quick roto with masks is kind of a pain, because you have to draw a mask, but then scoot it out of the way. And so a lot of times it's easier to do this kind of stuff with paint. So I'm going to show you how to do this with paint. It's actually kind of a neat little trick. So first thing I'm going to do is pre-compose my hands. We'll just call this hands. And actually, just to make this a little more flexible, I'm going to duplicate my hands and then pre-comp the duplicates and just say hands. And I'm going to move this hands layer on top of everything, so it's covering it up. All right, and so then I'm going to duplicate the hands layer, and I'm going to call this one matte. All right, and so here's what's going to happen. I'm going to set my hands layer to use the matte layer as its alpha matte. So keep in mind, these two layers, hands and matte, they are the exact same thing right now. And so really all I'm doing is I'm saying this layer use itself as its matte. So you're seeing everything. And so now what I want to do is I want to right click matte, and I want to say open layer. What that's going to do, it's going to open this pre-comp in a layer viewer. Okay, if you double click this, it's going to actually open the pre-comp and take you into that comp. What I want is to open this as if it's just a layer. So now I'm looking at it in a layer viewer, and what's cool is now I can paint on it. I can use a paintbrush on it, okay? And right now my paintbrush settings are set to do exactly what I want. So let me kind of reset them so I can sort of talk you through it. So normally this is what paint lets you do, right? It lets you just paint onto a layer. And what I want to do here, you can see I'm getting some issues with my key here. Maybe I'll go in and fix that. But what I want to do is actually paint on the alpha channel of this. You can paint on the RGB-A if you want to, and actually maybe this is what I'll do for you guys. When I made the demo, I painted directly on the alpha channel. You don't necessarily need to do that. You can paint on the RGB-A channels, which paints on the visible RGB channels, but also the alpha channel, which is cool. So what you need to do is first turn on paint on transparent, and now you see your layer has gone away. You can't see it anymore. So in order to see it, you need to click this little button in the middle, toggle alpha boundary. It looks like a little pink man, and when you click it, it's going to show you your layer again. And so this is what it's doing. It's basically showing you your layer before you've painted it. And now as you paint on it, it's going to give you this pink boundary, which is going to sort of show you what the alpha channel looks like overlaid on top of your image. Now, why is this useful? Well, this is how it's useful. What I want to do is drag this layer viewer, right? I'm going to grab these little notches up in the tab here. I'm going to grab this and I'm going to move it down to this bottom little tab right here. And so now what I can do is I can actually see, let me rearrange the screen a little bit. I can see what I'm painting on, and I can see the result up here. Okay. Now remember, we have this set up so that this matte layer, which we are now able to paint on, is being used as the alpha matte for a copy of both hands. And so here's how this works now, okay? If we go to like this frame, okay? I shouldn't see the mouth. I should see these fingers kind of over the mouth. So what I can do is zoom in here and I can just paint those fingers. And then up here, you'll see the fingers reappear. Cool. Let's go back a frame because it'll be even more obvious here. And so you can just sort of quickly paint back in the pieces of the footage that you want to keep. And you can see how when you're doing, when you have footage that moves really quickly, this can actually be a lot faster to just paint frame by frame like this than to actually do masking. You can see how quickly, and then on this frame, the mouth is gone. And so now the mouth gets revealed. So let's do the same thing with the eyeball, right? So now on this frame, there's no eyeball. On this frame, these fingers should be covering up the eyeball. So I'm just gonna paint, and I'm using a Wacom stylus, by the way, which makes this a lot easier because it's actually pressure sensitive. And so you can see if I don't push very hard, I get these little fine brushes I can paint with. And if I need to, I can push really hard and get a fatter brush. And so this is the process. This is exactly what I did for the demo video that you guys saw at the beginning of this. I just went really quickly through every frame that needed it, and that's it. So that quickly, I've now rotoed the fingers back over the eye. And you do the same thing for this eye. All right, so we'll do this really quickly. And this technique, I gotta tell you, this is one of the things that it's kind of a pain to set up in After Effects, and you saw how kind of clunky it was to set it up. And if you guys ever get into Nuke is incredible at this stuff, and the paint system in Nuke is a lot more powerful. The paint system in After Effects hasn't been updated in a very long time. There's a lot of features that I wish it had that it doesn't. So if anyone from Adobe is watching, I've got some thoughts for you on how to make this better. But this does work pretty well, so it's pretty cool anyway. So now, if we just sort of play through this, see, reveals these eyes and the mouth, and whoop-de-doo, there you go. All right, so now we've built out our monster, and I'm not going to do all of the roto because now you guys know how to do it. But there is our monster. So now let's go into our footage, okay? And let's figure out what we want to do. How are we going to make this work? How are we going to actually get that monster to come out of my mouth? So first thing I need to do is I need to get a good track. All right, and so I need to figure out where's the monster going to appear. It's going to appear on this frame because that's the first frame where my mouth is open. Wow, that is a beautiful frame. And then that monster is going to remain until my mouth is closed. So that frame. So I set my in and out points. I double click the layer. And by the way, I'm double clicking, nothing's happening. That's because I have my paintbrush tool selected. So I need to go back to my selection tool and double click. And let's bring this up here. And now I'm just going to track the motion of my face. And so I just used my nose because now you see how it's getting a terrible track there, right? It didn't track very well. Well, the reason is, look how far my nose moves. From this frame to this frame, my nose moves up a whole bunch, and this outer box isn't big enough to find the nose. If I make it bigger, now it finds the nose. But you can see how much slower it is at tracking. It takes a lot longer, but it's actually doing a great job tracking it. Let me pause this and zoom out for a minute so that you don't have to stare down my throat. Man, I have a ring light. I don't know if you guys know what a ring light is, but I have a light basically right around the lens of the camera, and it gives you these really nice reflections on your eyes, and it gives you pretty quick and dirty, easy lighting. But if your mouth is open, you get a lot of sort of shiny specular on your throat and the inside of your mouth, which, I don't know, it's kind of gross looking if you really just stare at it in slow motion. So we're almost done tracking my nose. And once we get a good track on that, we now have the motion of my head. And so what I want to do now is let's go back to, we can stop right there. So I'm going to add a new null to the scene. And now I'm going to go down here to my tracking settings. I'm going to hit edit target and make sure that my motion target is set to that new null I just added, because I want the motion to be applied to the null. And so now I'll hit apply. and it'll bring us back to our composition viewer. And if I hit U, you'll see that this null now has a bunch of position keyframes on it, and it tracks perfectly to my nose. So, the basic thing we do is we now, here's our monster we've created. So what we can do is grab our monster comp, drag it in here. Oh, that's not it. That's the wrong monster comp. Let me make sure I figure out which one this is. This is this monster comp. See, this is the importance of naming. I have two comps named the same thing. So let's grab monster and drag it in there. Let's put this at half res. And now I can just parent that to my null. And now it's stuck to my face. And, maybe I scale this up a little bit, move it down, position it where I want it. And I'll do a quick little every other frame render here. By the way, if you guys don't know, if you use the 0 key on the number pad to do RAM previews, if you hold shift and do that, it previews every other frame. And let's position this layer so that it doesn't start until the right frame. There we go. There we go. Oh, so beautiful. So nice. Okay, cool. So now we've got the monster tracked to my face. Oh, this never gets old. And you can see that a lot of the issues we were having with the key, you don't really notice them when everything's going, okay? And, there's some color correction that we still need to do because I actually had to reshoot this shot of me with my mouth open, wiggling my head around, and it had gotten a lot darker, so I had to turn on a light, and that light was orange, and so the skin of the hand doesn't quite match the skin of my head, my beautiful head. Let me show you how I dealt with this, by the way. What I did was I put a hue and saturation effect on this. And let's go to the reds control here and bring down the saturation in the reds. Now you can see it's also bringing down the saturation in my shirt. And I want to try and keep my shirt as untouched as possible, color-wise. And so if you look, the color of my head has a lot of red in it and not much blue. But the color of the shirt, it's actually pretty close. But what you can do, this is a cool thing you can do with hue and saturation, is you can try to limit the effect that this has by using these controls here. So I only want it to affect certain reds, and specifically reds that have a little bit more of an orange tint to them than my shirt does. So what I can do is I can pull these controls over, okay? And you can see that did help. If I pull this to the left, and if you look at my shirt, as I pull this to the right, it's gonna bring some of the color back to my shirt, but it's gonna leave that adjustment on my head like that. And I do need to pull this out a little bit. And so now, it did hit my shirt a little bit, but it made the color of my skin match this much better. And you can even push the hue a little bit if you wanted to make it a little bluer or something like that. And then I probably need to also put a levels effect on, but you can sort of see that helped a lot already just by adjusting the hue and saturation. Okay, so let's talk about how we get this thing to actually come out of my mouth. The first thing we need to do is time it out properly. So let's turn this off for a minute. So when this monster comes out of my mouth, I want the fists to be closed and then open up pretty quickly. So by the time we get to here, I already want those hands opening up. So I need to retime this. And so that'll work pretty well. I also wanted this to feel a little bit creepier. If you guys have ever seen the movie Beetlejuice, there's this great shot where he sort of opens his mouth and all these spider legs come out, and they move really, really quickly. So I also time remapped this. And let's actually go into our monster pre-comp here. There we go. And you can see one problem we're having is that some of my layers are not long enough. Like the right eye and the left, the right eye doesn't go out far enough. So let me actually extend this out so we actually get enough. There we go. Okay, so this is going to be our last frame, and you can see I haven't actually done all the roto work on this, but we're going to just pretend I did for now. All right, so I'm going to trim this comp now, and then we'll go back into our footage, and I'm going to time remap this so that it all just happens a lot faster. All right, so that when these hands open and they start wiggling, let me just do a quick RAM preview. I want them to move a little bit faster than normal speed and just look really weird and freaky. And it'll also help me because the hands will open faster. Yeah, there we go. Blah, 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 blah. That's the sound effect I'm going to make when this happens to me in real life. Okay, so what I need to do is I need to split this layer because up until here, it's inside my mouth. And then from this point forward, it's outside of my mouth. So I'm going to go to this point in time and I'm going to hit Shift-Command-D. That's the hotkey. You can go up to Edit and say Split Layer, right? And that just splits the layer right where your playhead is. And so then what I want to do is go to this layer here. Let's turn this layer on. And I'm going to make a new solid. And I'm just going to call this Hands Matte. Let's move it down here. And I'm just going to trim this layer up so it lines up with that. And then I'm going to make it an adjustment layer so I can see through it. And I'm going to go to this last frame here. And I'm going to put position and scale keyframe on my monster layer. Then I'm going to go to the first frame and I'm going to scale this thing down so that it could fit inside my mouth. Okay? So now it's going to come forward as my mouth opens. And then it's going to be outside of my mouth like that. Okay, and if I turn these off temporarily, you can see I need to make sure. There we go. So I actually kind of timed this out wrong. So I'm going to move these keyframes to here, move these over a little bit, and then I'm going to move where that layer was split. So I'm just sort of adjusting the timing here. Okay, so let's see. So now I open my mouth and it comes out. Yeah. All right, so I'm sort of roughing out the timing. Blah. Perfect. All right, and I'm going to put an ease on the end here so that they sort of ease into position. All right, so next thing I want to do is I wanted my mouth to sort of bulge a little bit as this thing popped out. So I'm going to turn off my monster layers for a second and go to the footage layer, and I'm going to add a distort bulge effect. All right, and I'm just going to sort of roughly position that where my mouth is. And I did this very roughly. I mean, you can track the bulge effect to the footage, but this happens so fast I didn't really want to mess with it. And what you're animating is the bulge height. Okay, and I do want to taper this so it sort of feathers nicely into the footage, but now I can bulge my mouth like this. So let's start with 0. On this frame it's 0. And then we go forward maybe to this frame and open it up like this. All right, and I can adjust this here. Here we go. So so it really opens wide. And then I'll bring it back down to 0 at the end. And I just want, here we go. I'll bring it back down to 0 right as this layer ends. So there you go. So this is just expanding my mouth and giving that fist a little more room to come out. And it also looks awesome. All right, and so then what I want to do is let's turn on the hands, and I'm going to set the transparency to 50% just for a minute, just so I can see through them. Actually, I'm going to set it a little bit lower. There we go, so I can see through them. Actually, never mind. I'm going to turn them off, but I'm going to turn my matte layer on, and I'm going to go forward to this frame here, and I'm going to rotoscope my enormous mouth. You guys are going to know my face and my mouth much better than I think I'm comfortable with after this. All right, so I'm going to put a mask keyframe there, and then I'm going to just sort of go back and just kind of do some manual quick and dirty roto here. And so what I'm doing is I'm just making this matte layer into an alpha matte that I can then use on that first copy of my monster. to get it to only be inside of my mouth at the beginning of this animation. All right, and I'll feather this mask maybe 5 pixels. All right, and again, you know, Cyriak is he's just got a lot of patience, I assume, to be able to do this kind of thing times a million. All right, and then this is the first frame here, so there should just be like a tiny little hole where you can see the fists starting to come through. There you go, and then we'll scoot that over, and by this point, we should probably start to see the fist come out of the mouth at this point. All right, so let's see what we got so far. So let's turn on our monster layer, and let's set that layer to use the matte as its alpha matte. All right, so and so let's say right about there. Let's see, pops out. So the timing of this needs to shift a little bit. What I want, and let me look at the time remap keyframes of both of these layers. You can see that the fists are starting to open a little too soon. I don't want them to open until maybe here. So I'm going to take those time remap keyframes and push them forward a little bit. There we go. And there we go. And now I'm actually gonna move the out point of this layer back to here and have that layer start here. So I'm just playing with the timing of when these things pop out. There we go. Okay. And I think, let's take a look. I have a feeling this is going to be too abrupt. Yeah, they pop out too abruptly. It's pretty funny, though. So I think what I may want to do is, let's see here. Oh, there's another problem. There's another problem, people. I keep finding problems. So here's one of the reasons this is happening. These hands here have scale and position keyframes on them. This layer does not. So what I need to do is actually go here. I need to parent this monster layer to this monster layer. So now, as it pops out, those will move too, and that's going to really help. There we go. And then the other thing I need to do is probably have those hands start even smaller than they do, so that they can really feel like they're coming out of, let's see. That's better. Okay. All right. And then what I might do is just sort of on this frame here, let me open up my little bulge effect here. On this frame here, I may actually really bulge the mouth and maybe even bulge it a little more here, and then have it go back down to 0, just so that as the hands pop through, there's a little bit of a sort of on my lips, you know, like that thing's pushing through the threshold. All right, and let me make this whole area bigger so that it actually affects. There we go. All right, and you know, I honestly, like, it took me probably a half hour of just tweaking this transition to really make it feel okay. This isn't bad, but there's still a little bit of a jump right there. And so some of the things I would do is just, you know, I might even try to animate the mask so that maybe like the top knuckles start to pop through first. So maybe, you know, if I made this take 1 frame longer before the hands pop out, what I could do is I could adjust this mask like this so that the top of the fists have started to come out, but the bottom is still stuck in there. And even just having that happen for 1 frame maybe can help this feel like that. Right? It just helps that transition. And the more of that you can do, the better. There we go. All right, so then there's a couple more things I did to really like help sell this. So one thing is I animated some color correction. So I put a levels effect on the monster that's inside the mouth. All right, and as it comes forward, it's going to get brighter. So what I did is on the last frame right before it's like fully out of the mouth, put a keyframe on the histogram for the levels effect. You could use a different effect. I just really like to use levels for doing basic brightness color correction, but you could also use brightness contrast. But I put a keyframe here. Go to the first frame where it's really inside my mouth and darken it. Okay, so I'm going to push the white output down. I'm going to push the gamma down. And I want it to just look like it's like inside my mouth. So I'm just sort of, looking at the inside of my mouth, looking at the hands and trying to match the colors, right? As best I can. And this happens really quickly. So something like that, right? And so you can see before and after. And so now it's going to get brighter as it comes out of my mouth. There we go. And now once it's out of my mouth, it should cast a shadow on my face and on the wall. If you look, there's kind of this radial shadow on me because I'm using a ring light on my camera. And so this is really easy to do. All you need to do is go to the monster layer, the main one that's on the outside of my face, and go to perspective and add a radial shadow. And then you can move the light source around, which is right here. You can move it. Now, the light source, I know when I shot it was right in the middle of the lens, so it's right in the middle of the camera. And then you just soften it to match the existing shadows and adjust the opacity to match the existing shadows. Something like that. And now that shadow sort of matches the real shadow. Helps a little bit. And then the last thing I did was right underneath this layer, once this thing is outside of my mouth, it's also supposed to cast a shadow on my face and sort of darken my face because it's, it's coming out of my mouth. So like there should be a little shadow here, a little shadow here. So I just made a new solid that was black, stuck it under here, and let's just trim it so it's the same length. Let's just trim it to here and just temporarily make an adjustment layer. And then I'm going to use my mask. I'm just going to sort of draw like where this shadow should sort of fall like that. Let's make this a normal layer now. And then just feather that like this and turn the opacity down. It doesn't need to be that dark, but something like that. I mean, it might actually look like that. And so then what I want to do is parent this solid to the monster, and it's moved, so I need to, oh boy, it's moved, so I need to now move this back to where it was. It was somewhere like that. There we go. And so now it will, because I parented it to that monster layer, it will move with it, and it's like a shadow on my face. There you go. So for the example, the only other things that we haven't gone over is, I finished the roto for the fingers. I had the hand go back inside my mouth, which using the exact same techniques. And really that's it. So you guys should now have all the tools you need to make a hand crab monster come out of your mouth and go back inside if you'd like it to. And so we covered a lot in this video. There's stabilizing, there's tracking, a little bit of color correction, and really, one of the things I just sort of hope you take away from this, I always try to give you a takeaway. One of the takeaways is sometimes there is no easy way. If you're going to do something like this or anything that looks like Cyriak's work or has that same style, you're going to have to do a ton of manual labor, and there's no getting around it. There's going to be a lot of keyframes, a lot of roto. There might be some paint. There's going to be tracking and stabilizing and adjusting and just trying to figure out what are those little details, those little visual details. Like, it's really bothering me, this pop that happens right there, and so I might even go in and manually mesh warp my mouth just to make it really feel good when that hand pops out. So there's a lot of manual labor involved, and you shouldn't be afraid of that. And sometimes there's no magic bullet to just make it easy on yourself. So I hope you guys learned a lot. I hope this was fun. I hope it gives you a little bit of insight into how Cyriak, I'm assuming, does some of his stuff. And hopefully you can freak out your friends and do some weird stuff with your body. So thank you guys. As always, this was fun. I hope you got a lot out of it. And I'll see you next time.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope you thought it was interesting, and I apologize for making you stare at the inside of my mouth and my pores and different parts of me for long periods of time. I hope you learned some cool tricks about stabilizing, tracking, color correcting, and just strategies for doing this weird kind of stuff. If you have any questions or thoughts about this lesson, let us know. Now, go follow Cyriak and check out all of his amazing, bizarre work. Thank you again, and I will see you next time.